Hello, Joe.
And hello, everybody. Thank you for watching Leadership Lens. Today, me and Sonia are going to talk about performance conversations and, in particular, giving feedback. Is that
Yes,
right, Sonia?
that is so right. I think it's the perfect time of the year. We know that feedback is ongoing all year, but we know especially during this time of the year, some leaders are having some challenges with having tough conversations. And we just want to talk about it a little, share some wisdom.
Yes. I know we can share our experience, so I want to ask you first. Have
Mhm.
you received feedback that you found A, to be surprising? You've never heard about it before.
Mhm.
And B, it just sounded so fake.
Yes, and yes. I will say I had an experience years ago where I was the probably the most tenured person on my team. And
Mhm.
so we were hiring and we continued to bring new people onto the team. And I was the onboarder for every new person on the team. And I found myself at the end of the year, my manager decided that they would give me partially met expectations. And I was
Partially met.
livid. I don't partially meet expectations. That's not what I do. And so I was
We
so
don't do that.
angry. And it was 100% news. It was nothing that I had ever even, we hadn't talked about it. As a matter of fact, in our one on one conversations, I was being applauded for being a team leader. And so that was I had never heard the feedback before. And then the part that was incredibly fake to me is that my leader was emotional and blaming other people, blaming
Mm.
higher ups for my for the information that they had provided. And I was really upset. And I think not just upset, but I was thrown off, and it felt like I was just sideswiped, just out of
Yeah.
nowhere. And it was not supportive. It wasn't supportive because had I received the information throughout the year, I could have done something about it. And that I
Mhm.
think was that was the thing that enraged me the most. What about you?
I do want to share my experience, but
Yes.
I was going to ask you, so in your years as a leader, how have you managed the situation with your team members when giving feedback?
It's a great question because I think working in various call centers over the years, sometimes things are controllable and sometimes they're not. And I think acknowledging that up front is important in that sometimes you're a leader of a person like for half of a year or a quarter of the year. And so really having a plan for that, I think is important. And I
Mhm.
say that because I've had to provide some pretty critical information to someone, and it was toward the end of the year, and it was difficult for them, but it was when they started working with me. But one of my intentions immediately was to let them see this is the year as I see it, and let's talk about it. And so the person really, they felt thrown off because I was coming in stating something that they had not heard, but all I could do was bring them to one, what their intention was for the year, and two, what was the output that I observed for their year. And so the sooner I think that a leader can get to having the conversation, the better. The more concise, not concise, but specific that a
Mhm.
leader can get in what is observed, the better. A person has an opportunity, and sometimes they have an opportunity to work on it, sometimes not. But I think if you can give a person feedback inside of the work that they are, the deliverables that are expected from them, and give them a very very clear, get agreement on what the expectation is, I think the sooner the better. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my thought
So,
about that.
so keeping that continuous conversations going throughout the year and not give it as a surprise at the end of the year.
Yes, that is the best. That starting immediately, starting and I think I'll add another thing that I think is really helpful for me is having I know where people are and they know where they are quarter by quarter and even month by month and even week by week because we're
Hmm.
in conversations. And so these conversations ought to include areas that need to be improved. That should be
Yeah.
conversations. And it's difficult. I always say leadership is tough. And so this leadership lens space is to acknowledge one, it is tough. It
It
is tough to
is.
be able to hold the space for the people who work with you and be really clear about what's working and not working, but it is necessary.
Yeah, it is tough, and our natural instinct is to just ignore the tough situation
Yes.
and put it in a parking lot and then think that we can manage it moving forward. But that's when, when you bring it up once a year during annual review,
Yeah.
it's not received well and nothing good comes out of it. So then it
No.
becomes like, what's the point?
Exactly.
That feedback, constructive feedback, then becomes meaningless and
Mm.
creates like negative friction between the manager and the team member, and then it negatively impacts the team members' engagement there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
My experience has been similar, but it's funny. I am not a fan of the sandwich method, and whenever a leader has poorly tried to give me feedback in a sandwich method, I have found it to be fake.
Mm.
So as
Can
a
you explain what the sandwich method is, just in case somebody doesn't know what that is?
Yes, I can. So sandwich method is when the intention is to balance giving constructive feedback and recognition. So you give recognition and, celebrate the wins, accomplishments of the team member. And then you move on to say, but when you connect those two things with a but, I think that's the first thing that everyone should avoid doing, because that just really dismisses whatever all the accomplishment and recognition that you've just given.
I get it. Yes.
Yes. And then you move on to saying highlighting the areas of improvement, giving constructive feedback. And then you try to end the note again with a positive tone. But it really is important to be very specific at these three layers. So the accomplishment, the areas of improvement, constructive feedback, and how you wrap it up is it needs to be done so tactically. Otherwise, it just comes across as fake. And that's how I have experienced it mostly from my leaders. Very few leaders that I've come across have used it so tactfully that, I really, I know that it's coming from a good space, like well-intentioned, good intentions. And they were willing to, and they actually offered me actionable items, action items that I can take away to change the situation, to improve the situation. And that's something that I have adapted myself as a leader when I have been providing feedback to my team members. So I tend to shy away from the sandwich method, but I manage it in a way that I send an agenda to my team member prior to the meeting. So they know that we're going to talk about wins. We're going to celebrate the wins. Also, we're going to identify areas of improvement together. I'm not going to do it by myself. I'm not going to tell. We're going to discuss. There's a difference. And then the third step is we're going to identify action items to make change happen moving forward. So when they come into the meeting expecting this sandwich method and the layers, then it's less fake and it's more meaningful, impactful.
Nice. I love that. And I love even hearing how you view the sandwich method, because I am very familiar. And I think the thing that I've just talked about over the years from just a different perspective about how I see the sandwich method and what I've taught leaders over the years, which is feedback is just like everything else. When it comes to each individual, it matters that feedback is provided the way people need you to provide it to them. And so there are people on teams who absolutely 100% need a sandwich. They need you to recognize them, give them feedback, but they need you to end on a good note, or they're going to walk away feeling defeated. And so there are people who need that temperamentally they need that.
Sure.
I do believe temperament has a great deal to do with it. And so what I've talked about over the years is I think that just like with anything else, there are different ways. There are different ways to provide feedback. And sometimes people will choose to maybe take the top bun or the bottom bun off of a sandwich for whatever reason, and like logistically, and will only eat like meat in one slice of the bread because that is their preference. To me, that is very much like how feedback could go. There might be someone who you give them their win, but then you also talk to them specifically about an area that you,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, that you observe that they need improvement on. There are people who don't like bread at all. They consider bread or rewards or that type of conversation as fluff, and
Yeah.
it's unwelcome. They don't want it because it occurs as fake or inauthentic. And so that person just wants meat. If a person says they just want meat, give them meat and move on because that's what they're asking for. And so for me, when I think about feedback, I think the bottom line to this analogy essentially is to give people feedback in a way that works for them,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's kind of maybe, like, I think over the years people have used the sandwich method as a primary go-to, but really there's opportunity for improvement to get to know how people would like to receive feedback and then give it to them in that way. So that's kind of how I see that.
That's the key. Get to know your team member.
Yes. Like
One
basically
size fits
one
all does not work.
exactly. One size does not fit all. That is a beautiful, beautiful, like it really totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So what other strategies have you experienced to be, impactful when giving feedback?
Yeah, I think there was a really simplistic model or framework that I learned years ago that I think is it's easy enough to just adapt. And one of the things is FIS,
Mhm.
FIS, not fist, but FIS. And FIS is fact, impact, solution. And the idea is to specifically give feedback around the fact of something that was observed and the fact around how it is impactful to
Mhm.
something that is an objective or an area that is specific to the company, and so an outcome for the company. And so the idea is to give them factual information that is not filtered through emotion, it is not subjective, it is the fact of what happened and the impact of the thing that was done or not done, and then a proposed solution. And what I like about it, because I can be pretty verbose, but I like the fact that it makes it concise. It brings it down to very like the base level of feedback. And I think that that is very supportive. I think some people really need you to just bottom line it. And I think that's what that does. Yeah. What
I
about
like
you?
that approach. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never heard about that before. I like it though, because, oftentimes when you get into a conversation about feedback, and if you're actually giving that constructive feedback based on the how the other person, team member receives it, the situation can get pretty emotional at that point of time.
Yeah.
So it is that framework, FISP framework that you just mentioned is so helpful for managers to remain objective and not get your emotions involved and try to give the feedback based on or use words such as, I did not like the approach that you took. It does not matter what your personal like is or where your personal preference is. You have to speak in terms of the impact of the team members' actions or behavior or the lack of performance, tie it to a greater, like a company's objective or goals, etc. And that makes it more meaningful and also builds that manager's credibility. So I like it.
Mm. Yeah. It also removes bias. I think bias
Yes.
lives inside of, like, oftentimes we believe people are great based on similarity bias. They're great
Mm-hmm.
because they're very much like us. They make decisions like us, they lead the way that we would lead. And so what it does is it disregards the other skill sets that are very
Mm.
much not like ours. And so getting to just a very basic, this is what I observed, and having a conversation about it, getting curious about how, like, what a person's intention was. I think that's also really important.
Mm-hmm.
But getting to the baseline of this is the solution, this is what is needed in order for
Yeah.
us to move forward. I think that is really helpful. Yeah.
Yes.
But I'm curious about you. Is there a framework or is there something that stands out to you that has been supportive over the years?
Two, actually. One would be even starting the goal setting with SMART goal format. So when we start the process, the entire goal setting process with SMART format, it's time bound. You're talking about the measurements, metric, what does success look like by what time? And you're also discussing and coming into agreement that whether this is achievable or not. So when you begin the journey, performance journey with this SMART goal format and that kind of discussion, it becomes easier to give that constructive feedback too, because you're not, the team member doesn't take it personally because something was agreed upon and you're now talking about the goal and the metric that was set before. We are not there where we agreed to be. So what can we do to get there? So it's a collaborative approach. It doesn't become personal, and it's easy for the manager to get into a constructive feedback conversation if the SMART goal setting conversation has happened at the beginning. And the second one is, I know we always look at the circle of influence, circle of control approach when we talk about prioritizing task or even prioritizing things that we should put our energy in focus on. I like to take that approach and apply it in giving constructive feedback. And the way I see it is, if you have identified areas of improvement for your team member, put it in two buckets. One bucket is, these are the things that you can actually influence to make a change happen. For example, that will be somebody's behavior and someone's actions. These are something only you can influence as an individual. You cannot 100% control it. I cannot 100% control as to how you would behave tomorrow, no matter how much I tell you, Sonia.
Behave differently. I'm glad you know that. Okay, good. Aligned.
So put those things under the influence bucket. And as a leader within your authority and power, there are things that you can 100% control. So, for example, the success metrics, what percentage of sales should be achieved by end of the quarter or by the end of the year? What are the performance expectations from this individual, etc. These are the things that you can control, and you put those in that. And why this matters is that anything under the influence bucket, let the team member lead. Identify solutions to make that change happen. All you need to do is to kind of initiate the conversation that, hey, change needs to happen in this area. What are the solutions that you can come up with? Let the team member lead that effort. And with the items under the control bucket, these are things that you can 100% control. You take the lead on making those change happen. So when you go into giving constructive feedback with this kind of preparation, it becomes easier to put your energy in where you need to be assertive and put your energy, and you know the areas where you need to be collaborative so that it doesn't really impact negatively on the engagement side of the team member. So that's how I look at it.
I love those. I love both of those. And I think the thing that stands out to me is like the SMART goal framework is really good because what they're determining is how it's going to be measured. They're determining if it is achievable. They're determining the time bound space that it will be in, and is it realistic and specific. And I think there's something to be said about gaining alignment up front. And so there's no confusion throughout. So I love that you brought that out. And then, it's interesting. I would have never thought to consider bringing the circle of influence and the circle of, and I've heard it, control and concern from Stephen and Mark Covey's working at the Speaker Trust. I love the idea of bringing that into this conversation, because making a distinction between what I have influence over and what I can control, it reminds me of like a long time ago asking leaders like the difference between managing and leading. To me, it's like this. It is, you lead people, you manage things and processes. And so if you make that distinction, you can influence a person. You can influence that. You can be in dialogue about it, but you don't control humans. Or at least we should not control humans, or at least try
Not
to.
yet.
Not yet. That's not a thing, right? But we absolutely do control processes, and we do control like business areas of focus. And so it just, I love that distinction, and I think it's something that I could pull into. Not that I need it for controlling people and things I don't, but actually making the distinctions and not trying, not breaking my neck in an area, you know, and just really going hard into something that really this person actually owns that. And I
Yeah.
can give all of that to the person and let them drive. I can be influential in the space, but I let them own like
Hmm.
they're going to do in that space. So I love those distinctions. That feels very, very supportive, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for
That's
that.
the power of ownership.
Yes, the power of ownership. I'll put that in my pocket, utilize it. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to add to the conversation at all? I feel like we've traveled many miles. We've covered a lot. Is there anything that you think we've missed?
No, that's all for today, Sanya.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Joe. As always, it is such a pleasure. And thank you all so much for watching Leadership Lens. We welcome you, of course, always to subscribe, be a part of this community. We always welcome comments. Please leave comments in the comment section if you would like, and share this space. If you know leaders that need the information, we want you to share it. And thank you so much, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.